6:19 coming up towards 6:20 in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're giving you a wider angle of our set here because we want to emphasize our flags and our emblems because we are coming up towards Independence Day. Thanks to Baker's Flags and Emblems of ARIMA for presenting us with the paraphernalia that allows us to remind ourselves, whatever we might think of patriotism, however we may perceive patriotism, what does that represent? At least the intention is to just make us aware that we're coming up to significant points in our history. Independence Day, the 31st, Republic Day, September 24th, assessing really where we are rather than just simply looking for march past and fireworks and so on. There are broader issues about governance in Trinidad and Tobago that have to be dealt with when we talk about ourselves as a nation, 59 years almost as an independent nation, 35 years, 35 years, no, longer than 35 years. That's right. The arithmetic is struggling this morning. 45 years as a republic. Yeah, 45 years as a republic. So lots of different issues there. Well, let's move along because students, teachers, and everyone else associated with the education sector are preparing now for the reopening of school in early September, whether it's going to be virtual, whether it's going to be face-to-face teaching at the secondary level in a carefully regulated format. We'll need to find out. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley shed some light on the government's plans because in his feature address at the San Juan Government Primary School opening ceremony yesterday, he said that government has embarked on a $4 billion program out of the cash flow from the state for school construction and repairs. He further noted that 100 schools were included in the initiative. So here we go again, because every political administration talks about this grandiose initiative to refurbish and rebuild and so on when it comes to school facilities. He also stated that after much hard work through CARICOM, government was able to secure Pfizer vaccines for children 12 years old and above to hopefully resume classes for forms 4 to 6. While stressing no definite date has been set for that. Let us now get the perspective of TUTOR via the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association's second Vice President, Kyrla Robertson-Thomas. We spoke to her a couple of weeks ago. Ms. Robertson-Thomas, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Fazil. Good morning to your viewers. It wasn't a couple of weeks, just last week I was here. I was shocked you invited me back so quickly.
Well, time flies. Let's put it this way. There's so much else going on. Good to see that you're in a good mood. Are you in a good mood based on what you heard from the Prime Minister yesterday?
Let me say that as a member of TUTOR's National Executive, we are always happy to hear that schools are being refurbished, rebuilt, and made safe for our teachers, our students, and the whole school community. But I am a bit peeved this morning because especially with the opening of the Sawa school yesterday, if TUTOR, as the minister likes to say, is a valued stakeholder and the recognized majority union, TUTOR was not invited, informed, and this school in particular, up to April of this year, we wrote to the ministry and tabled for discussion the arrangements for this particular school. Because it's not one school, as Minister stated in her address yesterday. They now have two schools, Sawa Girls Government and Sawa Boys Government, and they have disestablished the schools. And they have had no discussion with TUTOR, even though we've made attempts to do so. The Prime Minister and Minister opened Chatham. We are elated because it's been a long time since they have had a school. But no TUTOR official was invited, informed. We found out just like the rest of the nation via the media. So it's time for the minister, the ministry, and the government who continue to say that TUTOR is a valued stakeholder to really convert their language into action.
Doesn't that sound a little petty, Ms. Robertson-Thomas? I mean, if you would allow me... Let me just explain. Let me just explain. Doesn't it sound a little petty? I mean, that because you weren't invited, you're vexed?
It's not about the invite to the opening, you know, the discussion. And I said in particular, this Sawa school, as I said to you last week, while the government and the Ministry of Education have the right to determine policy, The union has a mandate to represent the rights of the workers and guard their terms and conditions viciously. And you have disestablished 2 schools. This affects persons with seniority and all other manner of things. And you have failed to have a conversation with the union. We are talking about a unionized environment. This has implications for members who work at both those schools. Those schools are going to be coming under one administration, and those things have not been discussed. Also, we have new buildings. You will only know if the building is fit if you are able to occupy, which we're not able to completely do. And we have not had a walkthrough by the RMU to also highlight if there are any things that we see that would be in violation of occupational health and safety, with a view to have them rectified before we start to put members and people's children, the valued resource of our nation's children, into such buildings. Do not for any reason feel that because it's a new building, all is well with it, because we have many examples in many schools that were new and could not sustain having children in it. Coming to mind right away is Cuba West Secondary. That pains the association. That was a new school, and hardly a day did students sit in that school, and it is still plagued with problems. Arangwes North Secondary, and I can go on and give you a whole list. So it's not with a view to be invited to the opening ceremony as much as to have had discussion relevant to terms and conditions for the members who are appointed to those schools.
And Ms. Robertson-Thomas, your tone appears, even though you were smiling at the start, and you used, by the way, you used the word vicious, that you would defend, TUTA would defend its rights viciously. It sounds that you're all in a mood for confrontation before the start of this academic year.
We are not in a confrontational mood. We are never in a confrontational mood. But Fazir, what the nation does not understand is that when you leave certain things to slip, then they become part of what is expected. And later down the road, we're going to have a judgment that will say, well, you were doing it all the time. Why noise now? So when we leave this, we will be plagued, and we had been plagued with calls by our membership when we first got the inclination that supervision was trying to get teachers to sign an agreement that teachers should not be signing to because there's an RMU. So understand, if at any point in time we allow these things to just fall at the wayside, what do we project will happen later on?
Okay, and because there are a number of different issues we want to discuss, and quite clear.
There are a number of issues.
Indeed.
We are not adverse to school reopening. We are not adverse to new schools. We are not adverse to the refurbishment of schools. What we have a problem is we cannot have an RMU. You cannot say that they are a valued stakeholder, and then we have to depend on you, the media, to give us information of a school being handed over, of for instance, the information I understand will be released today as to how school will operate. We have only heard snippets of what should come and may come at this point in time when school is expected to open virtually, we understand, on the 6th. Those discussions ought to have happened before, and we should certainly have had some insight into it before the general public is given the information. And what is the purpose of having a registered majority union?
Sure. And Ms. Robertson-Thomas, what is TUTA's position on the prospect of mandatory vaccination? Because again, the Prime Minister didn't say so in so many words, but we are interpreting it as suggesting that if a certain level of vaccination is not reached, the government will intervene, as with previous things, and that those were mandatory. So what is TUTA's position on that?
Let me say this. We fully understand that the government has the responsibility under the Constitution to pass laws for peace, order, and good governance. What we cannot sit down and allow to happen is just people have rampant views and spews about what we have not had a discussion on. Any self-thinking government and any self-thinking citizen will understand that for this to happen, it has to go to Parliament. And this is where you will be able to sit down and put your thoughts and views together in a cogent manner and not spew things via media, social media, or otherwise. If the government really wants to do this, they know what channel they have to, and the union, as well as any other citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, will have a voice, and they can pass it through their parliamentary representatives, etc. Because it will not just be the Prime Minister getting up in the morning and saying this is what will happen. We agree that what is the best that needs to be done for society, for our country, is what we will support as a law-abiding entity. Invasiveness of persons' bodies, if the government has decided through medical advice that that is the best way to go, and then they know what they have to do, we will support whatever is legal and law-abiding. We want a safe school. We want to return to schools. We long for the day when, as Minister said yesterday, children can be included in social activities and club activities, and that setting where they can really be reached and touched by a classroom teacher. Whatever is best for safety, we will always put our stamp behind it.
And just so we can understand, I appreciate the point that you're making, that if this has to happen, it has to follow a procedure, go to Parliament and be debated. But in advance of that, is TUTA in favor of mandatory vaccines if that becomes necessary and has to go through the legal procedure? Would TUTA be in favor of that?
I speak now as Kyrla Robertson-Thomas, because TUTA, as I told you last week, we haven't had a General Council meeting to speak to this. So I can only tell you that I, Kyrla Robertson-Thomas, would support whatever is necessary once we have solid evidence, medical evidence to do so. But TUTA has not had a discussion, a formal discussion, to say whether or not they will support mandatory vaccines, whether for students or for teachers. We have only encouraged each entity to do what is right for them and for us as a country and a society, that we would want to get back to some degree of normalcy and a level of functioning that will allow us to achieve our economic goals and all our other goals, because we understand the suffering that's been happening not only in Trinidad but everywhere else. What we do not support is the divide and the bickering and the fighting and the bullying that we are noticing happening in all manner of spheres throughout the country.
And Ms. Robertson-Thomas, in the 5 minutes that we have left, and when we spoke last week, and thanks for reminding me that it was just last week, because there are so many ongoing issues and discussions, but what goes on in those consultations? And the reason I ask it this way is that 1 minute your president is ripping up paper and so on, sending the message that the consultations are not being done properly. Next time you hear TUTA attended the consultation and were happy with the way things went. Are these consultations mamagai? Are you all participating in the mamagai?
When my president made her statement, she didn't rip it up. She made mention to it. It was because TUTA had not before been really invited to have any meaningful discussion. We were all invited, as I said, with all of the various stakeholders, and you literally get one bite to say one comment, mostly because there's so many people at the table. And we had indicated that there is need to have discussion with TUTA as an entity alone, bilateral discussion. We got an opportunity to have that discussion on the second draft of the document on the last occasion. So we said those discussions were cordial. What we want is to really be part of the fabric, because a lot of what the ministry would like to have done, just the same way in schools where we have the local school boards and you have everybody there who is able to give their perspective, including students, because not all the time the teachers see everything as well. You need that input from the teachers who are on the ground and not just the technocrats who are in an office, to show you how things could better work. Because one of the aims and objectives of TUTA is to promote the cause of education, not to shut schools, not to hamper this going forward. So we want to be part of that fabric and have that bilateral discussion and sit at the table. We are talking about amendments to the Education Act. Has TUTA been invited to give comments, to sit at the table and discuss what is going to ultimately affect teachers? Those are the kinds of discussion we are asking for. So the president didn't rip up the document. She made mention. And of course, we know that everything in the document is not to be discarded. But most of the document was built without even a discussion with the registered
And
majority
therefore, Ms.
union.
Robertson-Thomas, as a final point, failing that direct dialogue, failing that proper consultation with TUTA specifically, if that doesn't happen, what happens next?
If there are any things that are going to interfere with the terms and conditions of our members, we will hold a necessary General Council meeting and we will make a decision as to whether or not our teachers will turn out virtually or face-to-face. If there is nothing that will affect directly those terms and conditions, then we will encourage our members to do what they need to do to nurture our nation's children. But once there are terms and conditions involved, I say again, viciously, fiercely, guardedly, we are going to raise a noise.
But why is that happening? Because we just have a few more seconds left before we wrap up. Why is it? Have you been given any reason? Was it the same thing with the previous education minister? Is it the same thing now? Is it an unwillingness to dialogue with TUTA?
I think people believe that because you're a trade union, you are there to oppose everything, which is not the case. And while they come to the media and say, we are not in war with the union, we are valued and so on, they don't do so with any meaningfulness. If I'm to tell you that we were supposed to have statutory meetings with the PS of Education once a month, our last such meeting was in April. We have written, we have called, we have emailed, and we've asked for discussion, knowing full well that the term is going to open in one way or the other, and there are a number of things that we would want to trash out. To date, we have not had a meeting since April. So how is that meaningful discussion? And it's not to stop or thwart, and there are a number of other issues, as I started to indicate last week, that we put on an agenda every month that we need to have dealt with, so that our members could work and carry out their duties knowing fully well that they are being treated fairly. And that has not happened. We have asked, we're hearing about a $4 billion. We used to have a plant matters meeting monthly under the PS who was in charge of those things to deal with school repairs. We had people on the ground pointing out the issues. That turned into an email. There is no ability to further discuss or show whatever findings. So the ministry doesn't have somebody there every minute to tell them. The principals are not always trained in building management and all of these things. We usually go in, we do risk assessments, we are able to point out things that could better the situation. We want to work with the ministry, not against the ministry, but we keep getting pushed out. We've offered the Ministry of Education to allow TUTA to partner with them to train our administrators so that we could have better service being meted out and strengthen them in some ways that they have not managed to capitalize on. And those things are being merely, okay, we hear you, TUTA, and nothing else. So the nation sees TUTA as this bully that wants to stop, but the nation doesn't see when we have tried every inroad to try and make ourselves available to deal with the burden of work that is necessary to take education forward.
Ms. Robertson-Thomas, thank you very much indeed for clarifying the position of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. And indeed, we'll see how things go, because we're not far away from what should be the new academic year. But thank you very much indeed, as always, for taking the time to be with us.
No problem. Have a blessed day all.
Take care. Kyrla Robertson-Thomas, Second Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. Not mixing matters at all when it comes to the position of TUTA in that regard, in relation to real consultation, not the mama guy that seems to be prevailing. Well, it's now time to remind you of the COVID-19 protocols. Wear a mask over the nose and mouth when you go out in public. It is the law. Keep your distance from others, at least 6 feet or 2 meters. Stay home if you're ill. Wash your hands often with soap and water, or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cough into a tissue or into the crook of your elbow. Avoid touching your face. Sanitize those hard surfaces, tabletops, handrails, doorknobs, trolleys, and cell phones as often as possible. We'll be right back.